This show has been brought to you by Smith's Detection and the National Air Traffic Controllers Association.
My voice is the voice that guides you home safely each and every day.
24 hours a day, 365 days a year.
I am the voice of the safest and most efficient airspace in the world.
I have to be 100% of the time.
I am.
I am.
I am.
I am a professional air traffic controller.
I'm Todd Hauptli, and today I go one-on-one with Peter Neffenger, the TSA Administrator. Mr. Administrator, thank you for being with us.
Thanks, Todd. Thanks for the invitation to come back.
Yeah, a repeat offender on our program. We don't always get people willing to come back a second time, so thank you.
You've been very kind, so it's good.
So let's start top of mind with airports and lots of the traveling public right now, and that is the increasing wait times and lines at the checkpoint. And as we get closer and closer to summertime, that concern keeps growing.
Well, Todd, you know that this is the highest volume travel, passenger volume we've seen in a long, long time, perhaps ever. It used to be 4 years ago, a big day domestically was about 1.6 million passengers. We're routinely over 2 million passengers daily right now. We suspect that's going to get even higher. So we're seeing holiday kinds of travel almost routinely now. So it just means there are lots of people moving through the airport now. That means we have to find more efficient ways to move them through. We can't forget that we're in a pretty high threat environment right now too. This is not an abstract thought. We've had a couple aircraft attacked, one very successfully, and you had the Brussels attack recently, which shows that transportation is still on the minds of those who would harm our systems. So all that said, we still have to focus on the security of it, but we're really looking at ways to mitigate what we think will be a very high volume season coming up.
And what are some of the strategies that TSA is looking at? And then second part, how can airports help?
Well, to the second part, the good news is airports are really helping right now. In some of the recent visits I've made, I was most recently in Seattle, I'm seeing the airports and the airlines coming forward with lots of creative ideas. And what TSA, I believe, is doing differently now is that we're actually looking to collaborate and cooperate in a way that we perhaps haven't done in the past. So we've been meeting, we just held a confab with all the major US airlines, all the carriers. We sat down and said, let's look at our staffing models, let's look at the highest volume airports, the ones that are causing them the biggest challenges with respect to passenger volumes, and look at things like shedding some of the non-security duties to contract workforce and the like. Airports are doing the same thing. So I think that so that's been very helpful. That allows me to immediately take people back and put them back on security duties and fill out some security lanes that are currently unable to be staffed. You know, we're at a lower volume staffing level than we have been in a long time. So as we're trying to build back staff, that's helpful. The other thing we've done is to front load our hiring to address where some of the biggest staffing shortages are across the nation. We've refined our staffing model to push more people to the high volume airports. I've moved 28 K9 teams from smaller airports to the largest airports to move people. Those are some very effective means of moving passengers. So we've doubled the number of K9 teams, for example, at some of the major airports. And we've pushed overtime hours into the summer months. So all of that combined is allowing us to address what we hope will be the worst of the peaks and try to flatten out that, and then just keep volume moving. I suspect people will continue to see very high volume at airports, but if we can keep you moving efficiently, I think that would be the goal.
And as you get past the summer peak travel season and you start dealing with the rest of the year and into early next year, what are some of the longer term strategies and solutions, and how can technology help?
Well, a couple things. So we do need to hire more people, and the good news is I'm getting strong support from the administration and from Congress to do so. As you know, we were scheduled to lose more bodies this year, and I was able to keep those. Congress allowed me to keep the 1,700 that had been scheduled to go away, and we're going in with some mid-year adjustments to our request to allow us to increase staffing more. I think I'll be able to do that. I'm getting all the right indications for that. We're also bringing more dog teams on board. That'll be helpful. That will get us, that's a bridging strategy though, to be honest, because I think that what I'm most excited about is the potential to begin to transform the way we do aviation security across the board. There's a lot of interest in that on the part of the airports and airlines. You may be familiar with some of the innovation work that's going on. And this is not 5-10 years in the future kinds of things. This is stuff that we can do right now. Everything from as simple as just automating the conveyor belt so that you don't have to push your bag along. Turns out that actually slows a line down pretty significantly if I have to stand there and push my bag along. This is technology that exists already. The Europeans have been using it for a number of years. And so we're looking to do some of that this summer in a couple of key locations. If it works well, then we'll start to cascade that across the system as well.
PreCheck, long touted as a solution to help in some of this. Where are things with PreCheck?
Well, much better now than they were a year ago this time. We saw our largest enrollment day ever, about a little over 9,000 people enrolled earlier this week. I think it was Monday or Tuesday of this week. That's more than 2.5 times the rate we were seeing this time last year. So that's good. That's a direct function of more advertisement, working with travel associations, with customer loyalty programs and the like, credit card companies. We've had a couple of major corporations have bought PreCheck for their entire workforce, the traveling workforce, and we have other corporations that are looking at handing out vouchers with products that they make as a way. So that's helped considerably. So we're seeing the PreCheck population grow substantially. It's not where we'd like it to be. It's well below the 25 million person mark that we're shooting for. But I'm hoping that we can let a contract for additional private sector vendors. And then we're looking at some other innovative things to put out more mobile enrollment teams, to actually not just to go out into the community, but to go to conventions, to go to airports, to grab people out of standard lanes and give them the opportunity to sign up on the spot and get them right into a PreCheck lane if possible.
And what's the timing? What's your sense of the timing of the contract on PreCheck for private companies to help you on that, to get you to that 15 or 20 or 25 million level enrollment?
Well, assuming all goes well, we're evaluating the bids right now, and assuming all goes well with the bids and that there's no extended protest, then we should be able to let a contract before the end of the calendar year, which could mean as early as first quarter of calendar year 17. You could start to see other enrollment opportunities out there.
Those numbers jump.
Exactly.
All right. Let me switch to another topic that you spend a lot of time on Capitol Hill that is of mutual interest, and that is the whole issue of insider threat and employee screening, airport employee screening. Folks on Capitol Hill putting a lot of pressure on you on that issue. How can airports and TSA work together on that?
Well, again, I want to compliment the airports for working together with us already. I think from the people I've talked to, and I've talked to a range of airport directors and airport commissions, they get it. They get it like we do. No one wants somebody that you can't trust walking around inside your environment. The key is to figure out how do you take this trusted population and verify the trust. And so I think there's been some innovative ideas put forward. It's challenging to do it across the board because every airport has a very different kind of operating environment they're doing. I do think insider threat is one of our biggest challenges. As you know, some of the recent attacks were directly tied to insiders compromised, so we have to pay attention to it. I think that everybody should expect some sort of screening sometime during the day. There needs to be an expectation when you come to work that somebody's going to ask you what you're about and what you're up to. We did, as you know, earlier this year went out with an information circular asking all of the airports that are subject to security plans to do a detailed assessment, among other things, of their insider population. Who are the employers? How are those employers vetting their individuals? What's already being done to look at these individuals? What do they have access to? Are they accessing places that they should, and so on and so forth? Those plans have all come in now. We're evaluating those now. We intend to sit down with both individual airports as well as some of the bodies that represent them to begin to think about now what are the best practices out there that we could move across the system. I do think that there are good solutions out there, and that not all of them have to be the 100% solution, but we do have to have a way to answer the question, can you trust that population?
A little bit of inside baseball, but a thank you to you and your team for doing that through an information circular rather than just mandating through a security directive. That was important to our airports. Those assessments have been done, the mitigation plans are coming together. There's been some talk about maybe a sort of a nationwide ASP amendment put in place to address some of that. And some of our airports get nervous, as you've discovered going around to see all these airports. Some of them are very different, and what works in one place doesn't necessarily work in another. So how do we get what you're looking for in terms of best practices to be shared and done in a way that doesn't create sort of a one-size-fits-all solution?
Well, that's a great point. And first, let me thank you for helping us to figure out the right form to put that out. That was very helpful to work with you and others to think about the best way to get the end result we were seeking, which was just an understanding of that population without creating a lot of anxiety and antagonism. So that was helpful. So my goal is and I say this, and I understand whenever a regulator says this, people always wonder, if they should be crossing their fingers or checking their wallets. But my goal really is the same that you have, which is a secure environment, because you need to stay in business. You, the airports, you, the airlines, and others. And so I really don't have a particular method in mind for what we do. What I'd like to do is see, first of all, what's the nature of the industry problem? I mean, do we have a problem out there? We may find that there are a lot of good ideas out there. I'd like to find a way to share those best practices in a way that people adopt on their own. If we see things that we then think collectively belong in security plans, then I think there's a way to go about talking about that that doesn't create this sense that you're being forced to do something that doesn't work for you. I'm interested in a result, not in an action. Because what we care about is a really secure system. How we get there might have to change from airport. That's probably a long walk around your question, but that's
very helpful.
But I think that's the approach I want to take.
Let me shift gears on you a little bit. The Brussels terror attack, somewhat coincidentally, you happened to be arriving in Brussels on the day of the attack. That had to be a very difficult and challenging day, but B, what lessons can we learn from what happened there, and how are you dealing with that here?
Well, I was there, and it was much more challenging, obviously, for the people in the airport. I was on an aircraft that was just arriving at the gate at the time, and we were just held on board the aircraft for a number of hours until they could determine what to do with along with many other aircraft that were on the ground. But the big lesson there is it's a reminder that public gatherings are still attractive, potential attractive targets for people who would harm us. Airports are no different from that. It reminds me that going back to our earlier comment, moving people efficiently through the system is important. Even when you have large crowds of people, you want to keep those people moving, and that's our goal. I think you'll see that there'll be more visible presence in public areas. There has been some talk about pushing the perimeter out further, but I don't like to think in terms of perimeters, because any place you put a perimeter, there's always an outside the perimeter. What I think I'd like to do is, and this is where I've been really encouraged by the conversations I've been having with some of your membership, is thinking in terms of a security environment that gets progressively more secure as you get closer and closer to the thing you're trying to protect, the airport environment, the sterile area of the airport, the aircraft. And so I think there are a number of things that can be put in place, and there are some best practices out there that we can look at, whether it's roving patrols on approaches to the airport in those areas where you have large congested approaches, or more visible presence in the public area. But the real lesson is that people target large public gatherings. I mean, we saw it in the Boston Marathon bombings, we saw it in some of the crowded bombings, and you should be aware of that. You should plan to get yourself, to the airport in a manner that gives you the time you need to get your stuff checked through the checkpoint and into the sterile area, and don't loiter for any longer than necessary to get through the security lines and the like.
What does an event like that do to the intelligence sharing between nations?
Well, as you know, one of there have been some challenges sharing information in Europe, and they've said this out loud. This is open source reporting. One thing that we do very well in the United States since 9/11 is move information, and it moves very rapidly, and it moves seamlessly from the very top of the federal government to the lowest level of local law enforcement. And that's because you have things like joint terrorism task forces and others that have learned how important it is to move information irrespective of its ownership. And you have the appropriate clearances around there. I think there's more of that can be done internationally than is currently done. There are understandable concerns about sharing certain types of information about people moving, but when you look at a global system like aviation, you can be just about anywhere in the world inside of a day, and you want to know if you've got bad people moving around the system, you want to be able to track who those people are.
Right. Only have time for one last question. You walked into the job and were immediately hit with lots of issues. They keep coming at you fast and furious. But despite all of that, you've also spent a lot of time, energy, and effort on trying to improve the culture of the organization and deal with the mission and the vision and the values. You've got a new deputy. You've hired the first ever COO. Talk a little bit about what you're trying to do there from a mission point of view with the organization.
Well, first and foremost, TSA is an operating agency. And so I spent a lot of my career in an operating agency. And operating agencies, in addition, one of the biggest challenges with an operating agency is they always do the next thing because there's always a next thing to do. If you're not careful, that's all you ever do is the next thing. It becomes the last thing you did. And so it's difficult, by that I mean it's difficult to think strategically when you're doing something day in and day out. And when you think about TSA's birth out of crisis, in a sense, it has never had the chance to stop and build the institution that you need to then look forward and think, well, what are we as an agency? So to me, this is an opportune time in TSA's history to begin now to cement a culture and to build some more enterprise level activities. So a chief of operations helps you think kind of globally about your operations. How am I integrated? Who are the other components and players and elements of the system, and how effectively am I interacting with those? So it just gives you a chance to think more strategically. You have the people doing the day-to-day tactical stuff, but you need to put a little thin layer of strategy and strategic thinking. And so I'd like to see, I mean, in a perfect world, if I think of the crazy vision, where would you like security to be? I'd like a fully transparent security system, in the aviation world in particular, so that reservation to destination, it's just happening, and you don't know what's happening around you. Now that may give some people the willies, but I like this idea of how much friction can you remove from the system, given that we expect these passenger volumes to grow. You need to be able to think strategically to begin to develop that kind of vision. You also need a common way of thinking about yourself. Remember, when you're only 14 years old, very few people have actually grown up in the agency, so you're an amalgamation of many cultures, of the cultures of all the different places people came from. So this also gives you a chance to coalesce around a strategy and a direction that you're going, and things like the TSA Academy and some of the leadership training we're putting in place is a way you begin to talk publicly about that to yourselves.
Mr. Administrator, thank you for coming again. We appreciate the partnership and no shortage of issues to deal with in the weeks and months ahead.
Well, thank you. No, AAAE has been a great organization to work with. I've been well received by your members. I don't know what they tell you after I leave, but I've enjoyed the visits. And no, all kidding aside, I think I'm really impressed with the amount of effort people put into this and the amount of thought behind it. My goal is to just try to find better and better ways to work together and to take advantage of their great ideas that really are out there already that we just want to just surface.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Todd.
That's all for today. Enjoy time with Administrator Neffenger in Houston at the AAAE Annual Conference next month. Thank you for watching.